This episode of Tales from Aztlantis is brought to you by Aztlantis Premium. Don't you just hate having your favorite podcast interrupted by ads like this? Well, dear listener, you're in luck. Because starting at just $3 a month, you can support independent Chicano media and receive ad-free episodes, premium episodes, bonus content, and access to our Discord server. Just visit talesfromaztlantis.com and click Go Premium, or follow the link in the show notes. And now, on with the show.
You must excuse me. I've grown quite weary.
This hasn't been easy, I know. But you've learned a lesson. A lesson in honesty. Honesty to yourself and honesty to others. That lesson will stand you in good stead all your life.
I think we've all learned a good lesson. I've always heard that honesty is the best policy. Now I'm catching on to why that's so, and why that's so, and why that's so.
Greetings, dear listeners, and welcome to yet another episode of Tales from Aztlantis. We are your hosts, Kurly Tlapoyawa
and Ruben Arellano Tlakatekatl.
How are you today, Dr. Tlakatekatl?
I'm doing just fine. Lovely day out there. We're in the middle of summer here in Dallas.
Yeah.
It's a balmy 99, 100 degrees. It's, I mean, what more can you ask for? Clear skies.
For it not to be that.
Muggy weather. You go outside and you're just like drenched in sweat like within a minute.
What's not to love?
It's like being at the beach.
Without the beach. It's like
without the beach.
Being at the beach, but without the good. Well, here in New Mexico, man, we are getting just beat down with crazy weather. The village of Ruidoso, is on fire. They had to evacuate everybody, and I really feel because out there it's where the Mexicolore nation is located. But
right.
I gotta say, I worked in that area a lot. I was down there a lot, and a lot of Texans, man. A lot of Anglo wealthy Trumpers like to go down there and just buy up all the property and vacation there, and it's
because it's in the eastern part of New Mexico, right?
Yeah, southeast. And so when I was there, our company had rented an Airbnb for us, so it was like a really cool little cabin, and I had my Wi-Fi hotspot with me because I didn't know what the internet was going to be like out there. So when we got there, we were having trouble hooking up to the internet, so I busted out my hotspot, and the name of my hotspot is Fuck Trump. And so I turned it on, and the neighbors must have seen like a new Wi-Fi come online.
Yeah.
And they had to know it was us, right? Because we had just shown up. We're the only people from out of town. And so the next day I get up and I go outside, and they had placed Trump yard signs like facing my vehicle, like 10 of these fucking things just like facing my truck.
How childish.
Bunch of dorks. And then while we were out there, they had they were calling it a freedom rally, which was like an anti-mask, anti-vaccination march through the town. So it's pretty wild down there. And to see this extreme weather happening, I'm wondering if it's going to make them realize that climate change is like a real thing.
It's not gonna change their mind,
because already they're coming up with conspiracies. So like there's two ways they could go, right? They could either acknowledge that climate change is real and it's directly affecting them, or, which is what's happening, because I saw some people posting about it on Twitter, people down there are accusing our governor of starting the fires intentionally because it's so right-wing down there.
Drive him out. Hey, if it's option number 2, I mean, hey, more power to the government.
Right? I mean, where does she find the time?
So is this basically like New Texas down there? Are people starting to call it New Texas?
It's, yeah, I mean,
Instead
people...
of New Mexico, it's New Texas?
We call it West Texas.
Well, West Texas is a thing. It can't be West Texas.
Well, it's West...
New West Texas.
Yeah, New West Texas. Yanquic, West Texas.
It's the new West Texas.
So, yeah, but anyway, the weather is... And then up in the north, there's like all this flooding... And so it's getting pretty dire here.
From that part of the state listening to us right now, is there anything that you would like to say to them? Reach out to them personally and tell them something, Kurly.
Be careful.
Okay, be careful. To the residents of New Texas, New Texas.
Oh, I was talking about northern New Mexico.
New West Texas.
New West Texas. Just, pack it in. God obviously hates you. And go back.
Go back to Texas.
Go back to Texas.
Go back to where you came
Go
from.
back where you came
Is that
from.
the message here?
Build the wall.
You're not welcome. No, it's interesting you say that because back about 10 years ago when I used to, when I was still in school and I used to go out to Taos to teach because they would give me the chance to, get my feet wet, and into what it would be like teaching at a 4-year university if I ever got a job doing that. And so SMU, the school that I went to, has a campus out in Taos, New Mexico. And I remember this one instance when I was driving back home after spending a month out in Taos. And I forget, I think it was on 20 already. It is 20, right? That goes up there? Or 10? I forget. Anyway, so I was headed back to Texas. That's the long of it. And there was some road work being done. And so the 2-lane was being narrowed down to 1 lane. And here in Texas, like what we're used to, like when it's narrowing down from a 2 to a 1, and it could have just been these people there at the time. I'm not trying to generalize New Mexicans here with what I'm about to say, but there does tend to be a certain attitude out there in New Mexico towards Texans. So I'm on the left lane. That's the one that's narrowing down and merging into the right lane to a single lane. And here in Texas, like the way we do it is like you go all the way up to where the cones are, and then that's where you begin to merge. But everybody else is merging like a half a mile back. And so there's this entire lane that's open, and I'm like, oh, look at that. So I'm just like barreling down that lane that's about to merge. And as I get up to the point where I'm supposed to merge, this person in this huge truck with New Mexico plates on it sees what I'm doing, and they cut in front of me to keep me from merging. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here? What's with the aggression? And so I've managed to merge finally, and then once it opens up, because I'm behind them, once it opens up, this person just kind of like, and then I get back on the left lane, and then this person like sees what I'm doing because I'm trying to just take off, right? Because I'm in a hurry to get back home, and they're trying to speed up to catch. I mean, just like complete aggression, right? Speeding up and like, flicking me off and like, like something. I could hear him saying something about you Texans, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what the hell did I do?
Oh, shit. That was you?
That was me, man.
I'm sorry, man. I was.
So there's a tendency from New Mexicans to be a little aggressive towards Texans. But I get it, because historically speaking, I mean, Texans did try to go over and take over New Mexico back in the day, because you had some Texans who believed that most of what is now the eastern part of New Mexico was a part of Texas. And you can still see it like in the maps here that you find at like the little shops around the touristy places. You'll see this weird map where it shows the Rio Grande as the line, and it cuts right through New Mexico. And all that is shown as the state of Texas. Yeah. And so I have to remind my students when I'm in class, like, despite what you might think, and despite these little maps that you find in the little shops when you're out there traveling, that was not part of Texas ever. And it's not part of Texas today. And it never will be a part of Texas. So give it up, folks.
Damn.
That's my little nugget from New Mexico that I still remember. I hold it near and dear to my heart because it just means so much to me that the New Mexicans appreciate us Texans. New Mexico.
Well, I want to take this opportunity to kick off a new segment, an as of yet unnamed segment for the show. And I don't know how often it will be done, but, recently I came across some really cool news stories that I thought would be worth mentioning. And they relate mainly to Chicanos, but I could see this, opening up to broader Mesoamerica or history or what have you. But I just saw some stuff that I thought was pretty interesting and worth pointing out. And the first bit comes from your neck of the woods, Dr. Arellano Tlakatekatl.
Oh, I hope it's good news.
I think it is. I think it's pretty cool. And that's also the focus of these stories is to be uplifting and positive, right? Because we tend to be very down and the world is not a very happy place right now. So I thought some nice news would be apropos.
Are we supposed to be uplifting here at Aztlantis Tales?
This segment is.
Oh, the segment. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Not in general. Obviously. But yeah, so this story comes to us from Dallas, Texas.
D-Town representing.
Yeah. And there's an organization there called Malcriadas Collective. And they've just recently made a deal with Foot Locker to start a new collection featuring Chicano-inspired apparel.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the article says Foot Locker stores across North Texas will be featuring a new collection. The new line from Malcriadas Collective called Chrome Angels will feature T-shirts and shorts. Malcriadas Collective is a streetwear brand in Dallas, founded by artists Bibi Velez and Rosa Rodriguez. Since 2019, they have combined their Mexican-American childhoods and their love for Chicano culture to create artwork people can wear.
Interesting. I think I did see something on that recently.
Yeah, it says their first collection, Estilo Tejano, was inspired by their Texas roots. The duo believes the future of streetwear is women. So good on them, I mean, I don't know them,
good on them.
But hey, this is cool.
I think that's wonderful. Anything to promote our people, our gente, our culture, our community, I'm all for it. I will say though that, I mean, over the years, I've called myself a Tejano, as well as a Chicano, as well as Mexican American, indigenous, Mexica, of course. We used to subscribe to that label. Not that I'm completely against it, but it's not, something that we do anymore. But I think over the years, especially as I've gotten to know more people who have a deep-rooted sense of themselves as Tejanos, meaning kind of like the Nuevo Mexicano people up in northern New Mexico who have like generations of ancestry rooted to that space. The Tejano identity is one that is rooted in similarly in some of those early settlements down in South Texas, along the border, along the valley. And so a lot of those people, like that's their main identity is Tejano, Mexican American, but Tejano, right? Like they cling on to that Tejano identity. And it's in the last couple of years, people might recall that there's been some very problematic folks from that area in the news that happen to hold some very troublesome views about immigration and about just politics in general. So, and a lot of those people, if you press them, they tend to be these people who have a very deep-seated Tejano identity. And so I think, I mean, this is just me personally talking, and because right now you mentioned that these artists, these ladies are promoting their Tejano culture, and I think that word is a little charged now. The word Tejano, like there's a lot there. It's a lot more complicated than simply saying I'm a Tejano because I'm a Mexican American from Texas. Like to call yourself Tejano, like means that you have those deep connections rooted to South Texas, to those early settlements, going back to the late 1600s, early 1700s. And so I myself have decided that I'm no longer going to really identify as Tejano anymore. Like, that's not my...
Really?
Like, I'm not part of that Tejano community that emerged down there. So that's, I'm a Chicano, I'm indigenous, and I'm also part of the Coahuiltecan Miacangarza people over here. So those are my identities. So when people ask me now if I'm a Tejano, I'm like, well, I'm Mexican American from Texas. But I don't necessarily call myself a Tejano, right? So there's some distinction there. I don't think these young ladies have thought about that. It's something that, that's just the way my brain thinks when I hear words, and because that's my specialty is identity and what it means to historical peoples, and Tejano is one of them. And so I just kind of triggered that right now, and I had to get it off my chest. So sorry if I derailed your commentary there.
So much for positivity.
So much for that's what I'm saying. I don't know. That's gonna be tough.
Well, I was pleasantly surprised to see the use of the word Chicano in this news story.
Yeah,
and to say to see that it's inspired by their love for Chicano culture. So
right,
pleasantly surprised.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Have you picked up your Mexica calendar for the year 12 Flint? Or how about a paperback copy of The Four Disagreements? Just visit talesfromaztlantis.com for all the latest merchandise and show some love for your favorite podcast. That's talesfromaztlantis.com for all the latest merchandise. Now, back to the show.
Because you will find that there's a lot of people here in Texas who identify as Tejano who do not identify as Chicano, don't like the word Chicano.
Yeah, well, here in New Mexico, you got the Hispanos versus the Chicanos, right? And it's a very real.
So those two identities
difference.
are not the same. Mm-hmm. They're not synonymous, and they often can be in opposition.
Yeah,
because they represent different things.
Yeah, same thing here with the Hispano and the Chicanos, and then the Indo-Hispano, which is such a bizarre word. I hate it.
There's a history to that term that maybe someday we'll get to.
Yeah.
Because I know that you despise it because it's tied to a certain individual whom we've discussed here on this podcast before. That maybe we won't get into it now, but there's a reason of why he came up with that term and why. I'm not completely against it. I do think it's a little goofy, Indo-Hispano, but I do get the reasoning why this individual came up with that term.
My dislike of it is deeply rooted in its inherent goofiness and silliness. Yeah. It's just a stupid word. It just sounds dumb. Moving on, our second story, also dealing with Texas. So check it out. 2 stories, Texas related, and
twofer.
I'm going to start off.
Man, this has been this is a Texas episode, isn't it? It's all about Texas, New West Texas,
yeah, right.
New West Texas, Old Texas,
Future Texas. Let me preface this story by saying that I'm definitely not a fan of the police, but I just thought that this was interesting. The headline is A&E to premiere a 2-night documentary event called The Chicano Squad. This will begin Monday, September 2nd, and it covers this. I'll just read from the press release here. It says A&E has set the premiere of the 2-night documentary event, The Chicano Squad, chronicling a groundbreaking team of bilingual patrol officers plucked from their beats and promoted to detectives to form the all-Chicano unit dedicated to tackling Houston's soaring rate of homicide cases in 1979. Dubbed the Chicano Squad by Houston media, the story of these men who for the next 3 decades would earn the trust of the community and the department, becoming one of the most highly decorated law enforcement units in the history of Houston, is told through first-hand accounts of the original squad members and those impacted by their work. So, I'm definitely not pro cop, but this is a bit of our history. So for those interested in learning more about the history of Houston in 1979 and, the moves made to form this unit called the Chicano Squad, like nowadays I'm surprised it's not called the Latinx Squad or some bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's. I did hear about that too. I thought that was pretty interesting. I think that squad emerged after this very famous cop killing of a Chicano. I'm blanking on the full name of this individual, but I think his last name was Torres, and it happened in the early 70s. And so it was very highly publicized. This tragic murder of this Chicano, the same as the Santos Rodriguez murder of the 12-year-old boy here in Dallas, whom we just celebrated the 50th commemoration of his killing last year. And sadly, his mom passed away in December.
Damn.
So she was, just real briefly, because I don't want to get in. I'm thinking of also, speaking of new projects, I've been thinking, this is something that I've been thinking about for a while. I'm not sure if it's going to come to fruition anytime soon because we're both pretty busy. But I've been thinking about doing a series of just Chicano-related historical things. Starting with Dallas and broadening the scope to Texas and maybe, eventually do the broader Southwest and beyond Midwest. There's a lot of us in the Midwest. And even in the East, there's a lot of us up in New York, Mexicanos in New York. That's something that doesn't get a lot of attention. And from what I hear, Mexicanos comprise the largest so-called, quote-unquote, Latin percentage of people in that category up, and you would think that it was Puerto Ricans, but it was Puerto Rican people for a long time. But I'm hearing that Mexicans have gained ground in that percentage of being the highest.
Stop us. You can't stop us.
We're everywhere. And so Santos Rodriguez's mom, Bessie Rodriguez, passed away, but she fought long and hard to finally get the Dallas police to offer an apology because they never apologized for what this officer did, playing Russian roulette with this 12-year-old boy and shooting him in the back of the head.
Damn.
I know this happened in '73. It was a tragic story, and I mean I'll do an episode on this eventually. But long story short, about 10 years ago, I was part of the coalition to get the city of Dallas with then Mayor Mike Rollins to apologize to Bessie for what had happened to her son, and he did. He finally made a public apology, and then 10 years later down the road, last year we did a commemoration of his life, and we did a march downtown, and so this Chicano Squad series that's gonna be produced is kind of part of that long story, because a lot of the same actors, a lot of the same Chicano activists who came up to Dallas for the Santos Rodriguez Marcha ended up being some of the same people who were down in Houston also. There was a lot of collaboration back and forth. I mean, going back to the late 60s with the Farm Worker March in '66. Some of the Brown Berets that ended up doing those marches, were marching with people from Houston and from the Valley and from all over the place. So there's a deep Chicano activist history here in Texas that doesn't get a lot of attention.
Yeah,
and I'm
absolutely.
hoping to bring some more light to that. So it's a welcome surprise to learn that they're doing this show. So I'm hoping that it stays true to the spirit of the Chicano movement and the people.
Yeah.
It doesn't turn into some stupid, formulaic cop show, right?
Exactly. And for my final story here, we're going to my neck of the woods, Pueblo, Colorado.
Not Pueblo Bonito?
So, and this actually made me very excited. And I learned about this back in April, but I wanted to do this story because they updated it this month. Back in April, I saw that a new Colorado license plate celebrating the Chicano community is under consideration at the state capitol.
Uh-oh.
And it was updated June 10th. Creating the Chicano special license plate got final approval in the state legislature in May and was signed into law by the governor in June. It's a Pueblo-based organization, El Movimiento Sigue, organized the backing of the bill. And to quote Denise Torres, who leads El Movimiento Sigue, it was just so cool to see it all working. It is a truly collaborative effort. It was a long but beautiful process. And bro, this license plate is pretty freaking dope.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's not some cheesy, cactus with a sombrero.
Nah, man. It's two brown hands like giving each other the Chicano handshake in the middle. And then on the bottom it says Chicano and then the slash, AO power.
Oh, okay.
So
nice.
I might have to go back home and register my vehicle up
there. Get a license plate. There you go.
Yeah. It says that the clasped hands represent unity. The orange and yellow sunburst, because it has like the Rocky Mountains with the sunrise behind it, represents the sunrise. Chicana power is written along the lower edge of the design. Our intent with this phrase is uplifting the internal and collective power we have as a people, Torres said. It is in no way meant to imply power over others. And it's weird that we always have to qualify our statements by adding that, because people just freak out anytime Chicanos do anything for some reason.
Yeah, anytime a Chicano does anything, we have to qualify it, we have to explain it, we have to apologize. No one else is asked to do that but us. Everyone else just gets to be who they are and no questions asked. And look, they're empowering themselves. Oh, how great! Let's promote this.
Yeah.
Once a Chicano does it, like, hey, wait a minute, that's problematic. Yeah. Why are you doing that? Like, chingada madre,
So,
like, God damn it.
Yeah. So knowing all of those things.
Excuse my français, s'il vous plaît.
I thought it was pretty dope to see this license plate celebrating Chicano power come out in Colorado. So good on you, El Movimiento Sigue.
Yeah, exactly.
And
good on Colorado. Who knew that Colorado was still down for its brown folk?
Well, Pueblo has a pretty good track record in the Chicano movement.
Yeah. Is that where you mentioned before that you grew up in a barrio called Dog Patch? Was that in Pueblo, Colorado?
Yes, sir. I'm just a Dog Patch boy.
That's where is that where your mom is from, right?
Yeah. This made me, I don't know, just put a smile on my face reading this story. I thought it was very cool. So yeah, that's our new little segment. I don't know where it's going to go.
And so do we have a name for this segment?
We don't yet.
Still brainstorming that.
I was thinking of calling it Hunab Canoes.
Good one, sir. I approve.
Oh, and on a personal note, today, this Friday, as we record this, I appear on the latest episode, the brand new episode of Squaring the Strange.
No way.
So we recently had this event here in Albuquerque called the Skepticamp, and the team from Squaring the Strange were there, making some presentations.
Ben, Pascual, Celestia.
Yeah. So shout outs. And so they took the time to interview me about what I spoke about.
Nice.
And to promote our podcast. So big ups.
Excellent.
If you were so inclined, I encourage our listeners to head over to Squaring the Strange and check out the episode with me in it.
Didn't you also get interviewed by someone for their pod, a skeptical podcast? I forget the name of it.
Yeah,
we were
yeah.
on for a minute or two.
Yeah.
I listened to it, so it's a little decent blurb that they gave you there, and shout out to that podcast as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The name of the Squaring the Strange episode it's episode 230, Pseudo-Archaeology and Misinformation in Chicano Studies with Kurly Tlapoyawa.
Nice.
Because
you're not jumping the gun on on what we're going to talk about, right? I mean, because I know you discussed it at the camp.
Well, I don't discuss anything in the podcast that we have not discussed on our episodes. Like I didn't bust out any new stuff.
Okay.
But it was a lot of fun. I haven't listened to the whole thing yet, but because I was there. But thanks to Ben and Pascual and Celestia. In fact, we gave you a shout out on the show.
What? No way.
And it was a lot of fun. The Skeptic Camp was cool. It was really, really interesting. One of my favorite talks, I believe his name is Dave Thomas. He was like this, he's a physicist and mathematician. And his talk was on the flat earth, right? Just like debunking flat earth stuff. Which just blows my mind because in real life, I know two people who sincerely
flat earthers?
Believe that the earth is flat. And the way Dave Thomas did this presentation was he just said, like, look, here are all the ways we know. Here are experiments you could do on your own showing, the shape of the earth. So if the earth was flat, the following would be true, but yet none of these things are true. So,
but you're thinking scientifically, Kurly.
Yeah.
Let's see again. Back to your ongoing issue. Have you seen anyone about this? With your tendency to rely on facts and reason
and rationality and
rationality,
inquiry.
Because it's turtles all the way down, right? Like this.
I thought it was an elephant.
Oh, okay. Well, in my universe, it's turtles.
Okay. But anyway, that's check it out. The new episode of Squaring the Strange. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome.
And I also got to meet Brian Dunning. He was at the Skeptic Camp, and he.
Oh, you hadn't met him before? I thought you had already met him.
No. We'd communicated
Not
to
personally.
each other on socials, but never in person. So it was nice to sit down and just have a chat with him. And he showed his new documentary about UFOs,
the UFO conspiracy.
Yeah, and it was great. So yeah, he wants to be on the show. So I look forward to having him on. Yeah,
do that I can't miss whenever it comes on.
Yeah, Skeptoid
for always. I mean, yeah, he acknowledges when he gets things wrong, like you should, right? But for the most part, he has very good analyses and information about a wide range of topics of things that people believe without evidence. And so if you haven't listened to his show, then go ahead and take a listen. We recommend it. At least I do. I'm sure you.
Yeah, I recommend it. I listen to it often. Every time a new episode drops. And they're very short, so it makes it easy. I throw it on while I'm driving to the store or something, and I could finish an episode.
Yeah, about 15 minutes or so.
You know what? I thought of the possibility of us here at Tales from Aztlantis doing a show where we correct all the mistakes we've made.
Yeah.
But that show would be so short.
Right.
Every time we're wrong, we would have to come on. I mean, it would be like a 30-second show.
We have made a few errors, and I think we address them from time to time. It's hard to just go back and listen to everything that we've done, but like major things. Whenever we get things wrong, we try to address them in a different episode and correct it. But maybe we should do just an episode of errata so that people
that would
can
probably
refer
be
to it.
A good idea. It'd be very short, like I said, be like 10 seconds. And I was going through the archives, and we've put out, if we include like bonus episodes, dispatches, and regular episodes, we're at like 100 episodes.
Man, that's quite a.
That's a lot of content.
A lot of content, yeah.
So yeah, it's been awesome, man. They asked me at the Skeptic Camp, what my favorite episode has been so far, that we've done, and recent episodes, I really liked the Pirates episode. I thought that one was
Pirates.
fun.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Yeah,
that was.
I enjoyed it because it was a story that I was not familiar with. So it's always good to learn something new and also take a critical eye to what people have been saying about it, and discover that the facts are even more interesting than the fiction that's been played up.
Yeah,
right?
and it's always that way, right? I mean, the truth is always way more interesting. But I noticed we had some feedback on your solo episode recently, where you interviewed Carlos Aceves.
Carlos Aceves, yeah.
And some people were wondering, like, well, how come you guys didn't push back on him? But it was an older interview, right?
It wasn't, well, sure. So that one's a kind of a mixed bag, because we initially did get a couple of favorable reviews. People were saying that they really enjoyed it. They liked the format of just the interview, which is basically what it was. I mean, it was an interview that I did of Carlos Aceves, 5 years ago? Back in 2019. And back then, this was for a different podcast that I was co-hosting when I was out in El Paso, as I mentioned in the introduction that I did for that episode. So I did the preface to the episode to kind of paint the picture so that people could understand and they could get an idea. And also, I guess I should have, but I mean, I don't know, maybe not. Like offered a little warning, like, hey, you're going to hear some things on this episode that maybe you might find controversial or have
or that we've already debunked
certain feelings about, or things that we've discussed on this podcast that contradict some of the things that Carlos Aceves has to say, which is fine. And so I say this because this interview that I did, again, it was for a different podcast altogether, where all we did was go out into the community and we would interview interesting people from the community who were doing things in the community, cultural things, activist things. And so I felt that of all the episodes that we did and of the ones that I conducted myself, this was one that fit the format of our show, because it talks about Mexicayot, even though Carlos Aceves himself admits in the interview, if you listen to it, that's not what they were calling it at first. They were just calling it La Tradición. It wasn't until Tlacaelel comes in from Mexico and says, well, this is what we call Mexicayot, and that's when it began to sort of take off here in the U.S. because of Tlacaelel, so the reason why I wanted to offer this interview that I did 5 years ago is to keep it for the historical record that this is an individual, Carlos Aceves, as those of you who have listened to the episode will recall, that he is one of the first people. He is part of that first initial cohort of Chicanos back in the late 70s and the early 80s who are beginning to, in a serious way, introduce what we now call Chicano indigeneity in public, not in private. I realized that there was a lot of people who were privately, through family traditions and things like that, doing their own things, right? And that's fine. But in a very public way, in as we understand it today, where we have public groups out there that anyone can join, that it's not just a family thing, that it's something that's open to other members of the community who are interested in learning about their indigenous roots and their background and things like that. And at least here in Texas, I know that California had already been doing things, and New Mexico, they had already been doing things around the same time. And then Texas, although it's all the way out, and speaking of West Texas, way out there in El Paso, it's still part of Texas. So we're claiming it. At least I am. So here in Texas, what Carlos Aceves and his cohort were doing were laying down the foundations for what a lot of people today, even if they don't give them credit, even if they dispute it, or if they even know about it or acknowledge it, a lot of the things that they do under La Tradición, quote unquote, La Tradición, or indigeneity, Chicano indigeneity, or if they call it Mexicayot, they owe it to people like Carlos Aceves, because they're the ones that brought it. Now, Would it have made its way to Texas eventually if Carlos or hadn't introduced it? Of course. But there's always that one person that you can point to in any tradition and say, those people, that person there are the ones that laid the foundation. So if it wasn't him, it would have been someone else, but it was him. So that's why, in my opinion, whether or not we agree now, even back then, I questioned some of the things that he was saying, but I didn't push back in the interview because that wasn't the point of the interview. The point was to get him to talk about what he believes and what his history with the tradición. And it's not my place to question it. Yeah. We have that's what the podcast here is for. We question the ideas separately, independently from the individuals. And so I wasn't targeting him. I didn't want to target him at the time. I just wanted him to speak freely so that we could get it on record, what he did, document what are the things that they were doing, what are the things that they believed and continue to believe as part of this tradition. It's, that's basically it. And so I didn't want this interview to just get, because it used to be posted under the old podcast link that we had, but because we didn't keep it, those episodes were removed, so no one can go back and search for it under the old Los Professors podcast.
Yeah, they're not archived anywhere.
They're not archived. And so I wanted to archive it under our podcast so that people who are now looking into this stuff, because when I was doing this stuff, I'll just mention this here. When I started researching Chicano indigeneity, there was only a handful of people who were doing this. Now it's so popular that, you find papers and dissertations being published and released, not daily, but at least monthly or even, every year. There's like a lot more material coming out. And that's fine. The more, the merrier, right? But when I was conducting my research and interviewing these folks, 'cause he's not the only person that I interviewed. I interviewed others for my dissertation, which I'm probably not going to release. Those are more for my purposes. But this is something that'll benefit people who are currently doing research on Mexicayot. In fact, I'm not going to mention this person's name, but late last year, someone who was working on a master's thesis reached out to me, and they were doing their thesis on the effect that occultism and New Age ideas have had on traditional indigenous spirituality. And so they reached out to me to get my opinion because they got wind of our podcast.
Do they want to be on the podcast?
Well, I don't know if they want to be on the podcast. I think they want to keep their privacy for now. But the point is that because of the podcast being public, this person was able to use some of that material from the podcast, and then after interviewing me in their thesis, and which was finally approved, and so I'm not sure if it's gonna be released. I think right now it's not in the public domain yet. It's still under a paywall, or not paywall, but under a firewall, whatever they call it at the university, where they don't release something. I forget what it's called. It's been a while. And but if they ever do, we can ask them if they want to be on the show then. But the point that I'm trying to make is that these kinds of episodes are useful for people that are doing research and that are doing a historical analysis.
It's called being a historian, and who would have thought?
Right. And so,
as a historian, you would have wanted to record this.
Exactly. And so just because we published, or not published, but released this interview on Tales from Aztlantis doesn't necessarily mean that we endorse everything that the people that we interview have to say. And if we don't push back, it's because we're just being polite, and we don't want to cause any friction with the people that we're trying to have conversation with, right? I mean, because there's been several folks. If you go back and listen to some of the people that we've listened to, that we've interviewed, you might hear me push back a little bit on some of the things that they have to say. But I try to keep it within reason, because we're trying to have a conversation, not a debate.
Yeah, this isn't a debate show.
And so I don't know if there's anything else I should say about this. But again, if anyone has any questions about that interview specifically, or anything else that I've done solo on this podcast, feel free to reach out to me directly.
And how would they do that?
You can email me at tlakatekatl@gmail.com. That is my email.
And also, for all of our listeners out there, any hate mail can be sent directly to... It's funny that you mentioned that, because I've noticed it, the amount of papers and dissertations and theses coming out that have to do with this topic. And whenever they pop up, I'll like do a quick search to see if they've cited us anywhere in it, especially if it's a newer paper. And
yeah,
I'm like, oh, they don't cite us. This paper's bullshit.
Well, speaking of citing, I don't know if we have talked about this, but there was a recent book that came out early this year, back in February. Let me see if I can pull it up so I can get the correct name of it. But they cite one of my articles, the article that I did on danza specifically a couple of years ago, and they cite the podcast as well.
Very cool.
Let me see if I can bring it up. Okay, so there's a couple of books, actually. The first one that I want to mention is by Susan Kellogg, who is someone who's an academic and who has been studying Mesoamerican history for a very long time and has several books to her name: Weaving the Past, A History of Latin America's Indigenous People, Mesoamerica and the Andes, Native Women, Law and the Transformation of Aztec Culture. So she has several books to her name, but the one where she cites the podcast specifically is from this year, 2024, and it is called A Concise History of the Aztecs. And in that book, she cites...
Wow.
Let me see if I can find the citation here. Well, it's not pulling it up on the Google thing, but she cites the Tales from Aztlantis, and she cites my paper. So we are getting cited by some people, not as many as we would like, as we would hope. But again, not that we want to get cited. So that's not the point of what we do here. What we do here is so we can shed some light on some of the things that we have learned over the years that pertain to Mexicayo and the Mexica and the Chicano people, but also if people want to use our material for their own research purposes, I mean, that's also what we're kind of doing at the same time,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we're documenting things, we're offering our own opinions on them, and you don't have to agree with our opinion. There's a lot of people that don't agree with our opinions.
Really?
And that's fine. I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at you. That's fine. You can disagree.
Yep.
But if you're going to disagree...
Y'all have every right to be wrong.
You know, and if you're going to publish something where you're going to disagree with us, then that's fine. You know, let's have that conversation. Let's have that debate. That's what we do. We can talk about these things. But so that's one book. The other book that I wanted to bring up that cites us is, if I can get to it, I think I lost my page here. Is where is it? I think it's a French book. Yes, here
Really?
it is. This is from 2023, and then I'm going to butcher this name. It's called Admiravel. Hold on, let me try this again. Admiravel Novo Mundo, uma historia de ocupação humana. I think that's more like, isn't that Portuguese? I think that
Sounds like Portuguese.
Yeah, that's Portuguese. I was saying French, but it's Portuguese. And so they cite the podcast, especially the episode where we interviewed Dr. Jennifer Raff on people of the Americas. So
really?
They cite, yeah. So we're out
cool.
there. Our name is getting out there. Our show is getting out there, and people are acknowledging that there are a few things useful from our podcast. There's a couple of things, right?
There's a couple, one
or two things that people find useful from our podcast. So shout out to Susan Kellogg and a shout out to this individual. Let me see if I can get their name right. Bernardo Esteves. Oh, that's not too bad. Bernardo Esteves.
Very cool. Yeah, shout out. Thanks for the love in your books. Well, before we end this episode, as you know, Dr. Tlakatekatl, I was in Belize recently.
You were.
For quite a long time. I really started missing home. If you've never been to Belize, it's really beautiful. The people are amazing, but it is unique. It's unlike any other place that I've been, and it's not really what you think of when you're going into Mesoamerica, because it was part of British Honduras, and as such, everybody there speaks English.
Right.
And not only do they all speak English, but it's like they call it Creole. Mm-hmm. And it's like basically the way you would imagine Rastafarians speaking is how almost everybody there speaks. Okay. So you have like all these Maya people speaking like in English.
Yeah.
And they all sound like Rastafarians. So that was like weird. A bit of culture shock. But I was there as part of a project with UT Austin, and shout out to the team for inviting me to go down. And our objective was we had some LiDAR information so they flew LiDAR, and if the audience doesn't know what LiDAR is, it's you fly a plane over like a jungle, and you shoot the LiDAR down, and it basically removes all the foliage, right? So all you see is the landscape. So it's a way of basically peering through the canopy of the jungle and being able to look at what's on the ground. And we were exploring the areas around Lubantun, and we had all these maps with the LiDAR on them, and we would basically go out every day. Each of us had a team of Maya men from the village, because we were working with a Maya indigenous community, and we would go out every day and just chop through the jungle, chop through the bush, and we call it ground truthing. So you have to go out. You could see it on the LiDAR, but it could be an anomaly, right? It could be a natural occurrence. So you need to go out there, boots on the ground, get to that location, and actually record what is there, if there is in fact anything there. And it was quite the experience, man. It is incredibly hot there. And humidity was like 98%.
Whoa.
But the Maya people were super dope, super friendly. In southern Belize, it's the language groups are called Mopan and Kekchi. So you would hear mainly Mopan and Kekchi mixed with the Creole English. And then you had, some Spanish speakers. The closer you get to like Guatemala or the Yucatan, you start getting more Spanish speakers. In the north part of Belize, you have Yucateco speakers. So those are the three main Maya language groups. But, relating to this podcast specifically is the fact that we were working around Lubantun, which, if our listeners don't know, is where the notorious Mitchell Hedges crystal skull was allegedly discovered.
Did you get one?
And so I grabbed a few.
Nice.
Just brought them back through customs, and I'm selling.
They're just all over the place, right? I mean, on the ground.
Yeah, they're all over. And what's funny is everybody down there, when we would tell them, yeah, we're working around Lubantun, that's the first thing that would come up. Is like, hey, what do you know about the crystal skull? And so we went to Lubantun as part of our job, and I got to go to the exact location where they allegedly found the crystal skull. So I took a photo there, and it was very cool. Belize is a very unique place. The one thing that I was not prepared for is the fact that all the Maya communities there do swidden agriculture. So it's all slash and burn. And so, man, the skies are just filled with this like dense smoke. And the sun is always like this really weird color of like a orangish red hanging in the sky. And it took a while to get used to breathing in that smoke, man. I got to admit, it was a bit of culture shock.
I bet.
The other thing that is really interesting was when you're driving in Belize and you're going to make a left turn, you turn on your blinker to turn left and then you pull off to the side of the road because the people behind you have the right of way.
What?
So you have to wait. Yeah. You have to let everybody behind you pass, and then you can make a left turn. And it took a bit, because if you're not used to that, you will get straight T-boned, like gnarly, because everybody behind you is expecting you to wait, right? And so they're just flying past you, and you have to sit there with your blinker on. So that was a bit of a learning curve. Luckily, where we were in southern Belize, there were not a lot of vehicles on the roads, so it made it easier to deal with. But that took a bit to get used to. The one thing that I was really surprised by in the Maya community, guess what their favorite movie is?
Apocalypto. Damn. No. Please.
And I brought it up. I was like, they didn't get anything. And one of the guys on our crew was like this cinephile, right? Like this dude was like a hardcore movie buff. And I was talking to him about it. And I'm like, why Apocalypto? Like, it got so much wrong. And he's like, he just told me, bro, Curl. That's what they all called me. Curl. Yeah. It's just a movie, man.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a documentary. We know what it gets wrong, but look, it's a movie entirely in Maya, starring native people. All the characters are Maya. It's about Maya, and we're kicking ass in it. So, like, why wouldn't we like this movie?
Well, you know? Kicking ass, that's relative.
It's an action movie. It's a Maya action movie.
Yeah.
What's not to like? And I was like, all right, I'm not, far be it from me to be like, well, no, you should not like this movie because
why didn't you push back, Curly? You should have pushed back on those Maya people.
But it was just interesting to see that they were like huge fans, because part of our team, after I came back from Belize, a group of people stayed and they were moving on to another project. And the second project was like way deeper into the jungle. And so one of my crewmates had downloaded some movies, and they specifically asked him, like, can you bring Apocalypto so we could watch it out in the jungle? And I thought that was pretty cool. They're also Namor fans, the guys down there that I was talking to.
That's good.
Likik Talokan. They thought that was very cool as well. But yeah, nice. Apocalypto. Who knew?
Nice.
Who knew?
Pretty good, man. So before we close out the episode, hey, thank you for sharing that, because I think a lot of people, myself included, were wanting to hear a little bit more about your experience down there in Belize. I mean, you were gone for what, a month almost? Was it a month?
A month like May, 32 right? days.
Yeah. So that's quite I've never had that kind of experience. I mean, the closest, I guess you can say, but it's not the same as spending a whole month up in Taos, New Mexico. Like, immersing yourself in that community is something else, right? I mean, it's different from Santa Fe. It's different from Albuquerque. I mean, Taos is magic. I'll just leave it at that. So that's the closest I've ever come to spending so much time in one place that is different, that has a lot of history and culture, and not the same as your experience, but it's similar, right? So I get it. Before we close out this episode, this grab bag of thoughts, I wanted to get your thoughts on whether or not we should maybe mention a few episodes that we have in the pipe coming down the pipe.
Sure.
I wanted to start with this one, and I don't know how deep we're going to get into it. I don't know if we're going to find enough enough information on this. So some of these things that we're going to discuss here are works in project, just giving our listeners a heads up to what's coming on the second part of season 4. One of them is, I came across this podcast. The gentleman, his name is Francisco Mendoza, and I'll just go ahead and give him a shout out. It's not a big deal. They have a podcast called La Verdadera Historia de Mexico, or something to that effect. It's out of Mexico City, and they've been doing it for many, many years now. I'm not even sure if they count it as seasons or they're just like counting the episodes, but they've been doing it for quite a while. And an episode that they did, I think last year, around this time, about June of last year, Francisco Mendoza, who's kind of like the main host of the episode, of the podcast, I should say, mentioned something that was picked up by a little outfit called Mexico Desconocido, and that's where I found this. So this is on Mexico Desconocido's webpage, and it says, this is the title in Spanish, and I'll translate after I read it. México era el grito de guerra de los mexicas para darse valor. So the title is referencing that the name Mexico, which the country of Mexico is named after Mexico, right? But they would have pronounced it Mexico, is or was the battle cry of the Mexica people that they used to give themselves valor, or to, hype themselves up, basically, right before they were going into battle. And this caught my attention because this is not something that I had ever heard of. Have you ever heard of this, Kurly? This idea that the Mexica warriors, and I'm not sure if it was the Eagle warriors or the Jaguar warriors, or just all of them in general, as they're out in the battlefield. And here I'm kind of picturing like the Lord of the Rings and some of those scenes where they're out, right? And they're like hyping themselves up, and so
those massive armies lined up, getting ready to rush across the battlefield, and so
they're yelling Mexico. It's kind of like today's soccer games, right? Mexico, Mexico, right? But back then it would have been Mexico, and so they're hyping themselves up before they go into battle, and that apparently, if I'm not mistaken, that this is not only a way for them to hype themselves up, but it was also kind of a way to intimidate their enemies, because, here come the Mexicans. And back then, before the arrival of the Spanish, the Aztec Mexica were the leading force of Mesoamerica. And so it was a way to instill fear in the hearts of their enemies, and also as a way to hype themselves up right before they went into battle. And so this is an episode that we're going to this is a topic, I should say, that we're going to dig into and see what else we can find. Because unfortunately, Mr. Mendoza, he's really good at as a narrator, as a host, as an interpreter of history. He's not an actual historian by trade. That's not his primary career. He's more of a layperson, an enthusiast who's been studying Mexican history all his life, which is fine. To each his own. But because he's not a trained historian, he doesn't cite his sources very well, and that is the case with this notion, with this idea that he put out there in the ether. And so it's kind of hard to follow exactly where he got this from. But no need to worry, dear listeners. We're going to look into this, and we will get to the bottom of it. And if we find any sources that can verify and validate his claims, then we will share it with you. We'll tell you exactly where to find that stuff for yourself, as we do.
It's always so frustrating when people say something interesting or make a claim about history, but they don't bother to tell you where they got it from.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, Can you do that, please? Can you let us know?
Right.
Because that's something that happens amongst, Mexicayo, MCRCA affiliated authors. They'll always say stuff, or they'll even write out, alleged direct quotes and be like, oh yeah, Sahagún said this in the Florentine Codex. And they write out this long, elaborate quote. But now the Florentine Codex is available online digitally, and you can search it. So whenever I see these people quoting the Florentine Codex, I always hop onto the digital copy and I type in this quote and see if it actually exists in the pages. And when it comes to the MCRCA people, more often than not, the quotes do not exist. So always check your work, kids. It's super helpful.
Right.
But I've got four topics that I'm currently working on. The Codex Escalada, which is a document which purports to show, proof of La Virgen de Guadalupe. An episode on Cuauhtemoc's bones. La Virgen de la Macana, which is a piece of New Mexican history. And I'm finally cracking open that walnut of the Mexica banner, the Panquetzali.
The Panquetzali, that's going to be a really good one there.
Those are the four topics that I'm currently working on.
So I'm working on El Grito de Guerra, the battle cry of the Mexica. I'm also working on the Nepohualtzintzin. I believe I'm saying that right. Nepohualtzintzin.
The Mexica calculator.
The Mexica or Mesoamerican, the alleged calculator that has been making the rounds recently. I've been seeing a lot of stuff on social media where there's people who go around giving demonstrations and talks and lectures, and I believe it's also becoming part of like ethnic studies, which we should also discuss here in a minute. Ethnic studies curriculum, and it's presented as valid as proof of this device that it supposedly existed, and we're looking into that because we want to know, is this really true? I'm not here to say that it's not true because I haven't found evidence to suggest that it's one way or the other yet. I'm doing my research, and so once I complete the research on this, we'll do an episode, and dear listeners, you will be the first to know more in depth about the background and the origins of this device called the Nepohualtzintzin. So that's an episode that's in the works. The other episode that I've been working on for a while as well is, and I think it's something that we're kind of both working on. You're doing your own research on your end, and on my end, we're looking at we feel like it's an erroneous or dubious. Let's say there's a dubious connection between the term Tonantzin and the teteo called Coatlicue. And in the tradición in Mexicayo, a lot of people usually call Coatlicue Tonantzin Tlali Coatlicue, right? And so we want to know whether and usually by extension this is associated with the Virgen de Guadalupe, right? Because the Virgen has for the longest time been, and we've done episodes on this before, but it's still not very clear as to where the connection comes from between Tonantzin, the so-called Tonantzin Coatlicue, and Guadalupe, and whether or not our ancient ancestors called Coatlicue Tonantzin versus the other teteo that were called Tonantzin, which there are many, and that are not Coatlicue, and they're not usually associated with the Virgen. Yeah. So that's another aspect of it as well. And so, dear listeners, we're looking into that as well, and hopefully we'll have something ready to go by the end of season 4, and I'm trying to think, is there another main topic? I mean, those are the 3 main ones that I'm working on, and you have the 4, right, that you just mentioned. So that should be enough to get us through a good part of the rest of season 4. So
yeah, and we want to take this moment to because Dr. Tlakatekatl is going on a well-deserved vacation. And so we are taking a short hiatus in this season. But as we've said, we've got tons of stuff in the pipeline that we have in the works. And we're excited to bring all this new information to our listeners. And yeah, we'll be gone for a few weeks at least, and in the meantime I might pop on and do some dispatches and just to keep some stuff out there if any news comes up or any topics that I find interesting. But yeah, and I hope you enjoy your vacation.
Well, thank you very much. And also, don't forget, listeners, you also have, those of you that are Patreon supporters have access to Kurly's exclusive show on movies that he enjoyed growing up, cult movies, Burning Paradise. I don't know if you want to say a few things about that.
Yeah, so I've got a little mini-series going on within the Tales from Aztlantis family, dealing with my personal love of cinema. So in each episode, I just take a look back at some of the movies that I grew up with that I enjoy. The latest episode is on The Wanderers, which is a very cool movie. Not as good as The Warriors, in my opinion, but it's always overshadowed by The Warriors, I think. So I thought it was worth taking a look at. And and it's a cool movie. I mean, it's got a great soundtrack. It's got really cool fight scenes, and I don't know. It's and it's got Karen Allen in it. So, you know, for all the people my age who did not have a crush on her, you know, I think there's very few people my age that did not have a crush on Karen Allen growing up. So, yeah, if you want to check that out, I've also got another special mini series in the works. It's percolating. So I'll have more information on that later.
Awesome. Anything else before we sign off for a bit?
Nope. I just want to thank everybody for listening, and I encourage everyone to keep in pursuit of the truth, because you know what I like to say about the truth.
What's that, Curl?
The truth, it's like medicine. It doesn't always taste good, but it is always good for you.
Right on.
Timoitase.
Proposed bill in Colorado would allow Colorado drivers to celebrate their Chicana heritage.
If passed, this would create a special license plate featuring art from a group of Colorado artists. Jasmine Arenas is your reporter in Denver, and as she found out, it hasn't been an easy bill to pass.
Organizers gathered more than 3,000 signatures in a matter of days. Now, this controversial bill that has been talked about for nearly a decade is being debated again at the Capitol. These plates plastered on vehicles serve as a form of vehicle identity. For some, it may just be a license plate. For others, it carries meaning.
Anybody who identifies in both building power in our history and in our future, that is a Chicano, and I'm really excited to be carrying this bill.
Representative Tim Hernandez and Senator Julie Gonzalez are hoping to introduce the bill by the end of the month.
The Chicano license plate is going to be a new special license plate that we're going to be manufacturing in the state of Colorado to represent Chicano history, to invest and create pathways for Chicano youth leadership programs across the state of Colorado.
And we're hopeful that the third time around, that we're able to actually see this be signed into law.
In the last 8 years, a similar bill was introduced twice, once in 2016 and in 2018 by former Colorado Representative Joseph Salazar, and both times it failed.
It didn't pass because the rhetoric from the Republican Party then and now was pretty fierce against our communities.
Opponents of the bill share having a plate like this could be a form of racism towards other communities. However, Salazar argues license plates like the Italian American heritage were passed, and with no pushback.
There was no explanation as to why they killed the bill while they were passing other license plate bills.
The proposed bill would essentially help nonprofits like El Movimiento Sigue, the movement continues, a Pueblo nonprofit that works to promote leadership and cultural pride amongst youth.
No matter your culture, you should always be proud of your ancestors and where you came from and your heritage. And so that's why, you know, for us, that's what it symbolizes.
More than just a license plate, but a symbol of hope and power. The first hearing is slated for February 29th, but organizers are still encouraging more signatures. At the Capitol, Jasmine Arenas covering Colorado First.
And if this is approved, drivers can get the plates after paying two $25 fees.
Thank you for listening to Tales from Aztlantis, a project of the Chimali Institute of Mesoamerican Arts. If you enjoy the show, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter. You can do this by visiting talesfromaztlantis.com and clicking Support the Podcast. Your continued support will help keep the podcast ad-free and independent. Until next time, Timo Itase.